Eat Well, Travel Often is sponsored by The Book House, an independent bookstore with a cozy atmosphere where you can browse a plethora of fantastic selections, all while enjoying a delicious hot beverage. The shelves at The Book House are specially curated to be packed with gems that make for exceptional reads for patrons of all ages. Owner Nadej Nickel also features many local artists and artisans in a special gallery space, as well as original gifts from socially responsible companies. Their events calendar includes readings from authors, topic discussions, workshops, book club meetings, and more. Whether you're looking for a classic, a bestseller, a hidden treasure, an original gift that gives back, or just a community to join, visit The Book House, located at 281 Essex Street in Millburn, New Jersey, or visit them online at thebookhousemillburn.com. Tell them we said hello.
Welcome to Eat Well, Travel Often, a podcast about the intersection of food, travel, the environment, the mind, body, and spirit. I'm Melissa Goldberg. Food is the lens through which I look at life, where it comes from, how it's cooked, its origin. Food creates a community, and how we connect with each other through food is an expression of who we are. I hope to share with you my passion for food, from everything from book to plate. On today's episode, I had the pleasure to speak with Dr. Charles Stuart Platkin. For more than 20 years, Dr. Platkin has been working to uncover the mysteries and the myths surrounding food, nutrition, fitness, and medicine. Started over 20 years ago, his nonprofit, The Diet Detective, has been educating and inspiring consumers to help them make meaningful changes in their lives. His first book, Breaking the Pattern, was a bestseller in hardcover. It has been used by addiction clinics to assist patients with resolving drug and alcohol-related issues. He is also the executive director of the Hunter College, New York City Food Policy Center. Charles and I have known each other for more than 2 decades. We first met in 1998 when he launched a health and fitness website called eFit. I was his communications director. I also handled the publicity for a few of his books and his yearly airline survey, which we will talk about today. As with all my episodes, after the interview is what I call the Book to Plate segment, where I talk about my personal experience of something travel or food related. For this Book to Plate segment, I review the most amazing restaurant in Santa Monica, California, called Dialogue. My husband, Louis, joins me to talk about our over 20-course meal. And it would be great if you could also be so kind to review Eat Well, Travel Often podcast, especially on Apple Podcasts. This will help others find the podcast and help me get other great guests to talk with. Now let's talk with Charles Platkin. Welcome, Charles. Or do I have to call you Dr. Platkin?
No, you can call me Charles. Good morning.
It's been a while. What have you been up to lately?
A lot, actually. First of all, I went and, for my law degree, I went and got a master's in public health and a PhD. And I had a television show that was on WeTV and written 7 books. And now I'm on faculty. I'm a professor at City University of New York at Hunter College. And I accepted a position at a center. It's called the Hunter College New York City Food Policy Center. And I'm also the editor of dietdetective.com.
So one of the things you're most known for is the Airline food survey. How did you start this? I'm familiar with, I remember you starting it, but I don't remember why. What made you do that?
Yes. So I started looking at food. I was traveling with, then she was my fiance, which was Shannon, and we were on a plane. And I noticed them, passing out the food, and it was free at that time. Not that I'm 200 years old, but it was free. It was probably the last year they were offering free food service. And I noticed that everybody was eating everything that was put in front of them. And I thought, that's really interesting. I wonder if they even know, first of all, they're always complaining. People were always complaining about the food. And here they are, they're getting it, putting it right in front of them. And I watched them all scoff it down, thinking like, okay, they complain about it, but they eat all of it. And I go, wow, that can't be too healthy for them. It must be very high in calories and sodium. So we need to figure out what's going on there. I thought it would be fantastic for. We were then running EFIT, which you were a part of. And I thought it was a really fantastic idea to look at it, and so did you. And we started analyzing all the food. Some of them we even bagged and brought back to our offices and sent to a lab. Some of it we analyzed their menu. It was a real ad hoc hodgepodge thing. And then we came out with our first airline survey, and that was in 2000.
So how many airlines, do you usually get a response from? Is it the same? Is it different?
Well, every year we try to look at all the airlines domestically, and we're going to change that probably in the next 2 years, where we're going to look at every single airline, do a domestic and international, which I really haven't announced yet. This is the first time I've talked about it. But when we look at the airlines, we look at all the domestics, what the major carriers are, which is, it varies what's considered a major carrier versus a regional carrier. But we use sort of the FAA analytics on that. And there are about 10 or 11 major carriers in the U.S., and we include Air Canada as well because they have so many flights in and out of the U.S. And we're also going to include WestJet next year. So the airlines typically have responded in such a negative way, almost aggressively negative, asking for this kind of information. What do we ask for? We ask for the nutrient information for the foods that they serve on flights, and they come up. Some of them come up with excuses that are almost unbelievable. Knowing what I know and knowing that they have this information literally at their fingertips. I've been in food service. I've owned restaurants before. You cannot serve food in any way, shape, or form, especially in masses, meaning institutional food, without having precise, exact, down to the gram, kilogram method of, with recipes. So as long as you have a recipe, you can do a recipe analysis. Probably a 12-year-old can do it. So any excuse by an airline saying that they don't have the ability to analyze and give nutrient information is just nonsense. They just don't think it's important. So that sort of becomes that critical component. What's important and why? And why are we trying to get information from an airline about their food that they're serving? Well, who cares? And why does it matter? Shouldn't we just be worried about their maintenance schedule, which, by the way, is not always so good? And almost 25% of planes shouldn't be in the air, but that's a whole nother story, and not for me. That's for Gary Stoller, the former USA Today airline analyst. So I think that when we look at why food is important on an airline, I think the most important thing to look at is we generally underestimate the amount of time that we have to travel. Even as much as we travel today, even experienced travelers would note this, that they kind of underestimate that a 2-hour flight or a 2.5-hour flight or a 3-hour flight ends up being a 6 or 7 or 8-hour flight, right? Because it's not just the flying time, it's the pomp and circumstance around flying. So it's getting up, getting to the airport, arriving at the airport, getting to your gate, and then getting on the airplane, and then flying, and then landing, renting cars, getting transportation, getting to hotels or destinations or friends or family's homes, or the Airbnb that you listed, subscribed to. So all of those things add up, right? So you need to even go 2.5 times what your flight time is to really analyze what your day is going to look like. Well, we often underestimate the amount of food we eat, so we're trying to usually grab and go. And many times we're finally at a resting place on the flight where we're finally relaxed because maybe we got a movie in front of us and we're like, wow, I'm hungry. And this is your first opportunity to know this. And you think, I have nothing to eat, or I have scraps from an old trip that I took where there were some leftover nuts in my bag or something like that. So the airline, you can't now get off the flight midair, 35,000 feet up, and say, hey, I'm hungry. Where can I go to eat? No, you're stuck on that flight, and that's whatever's available that they're serving is what you have to eat, right? So I think that there's a responsibility for an airline not to serve all healthy vegan meals, but it's important that an airline take responsibility for this and that there are no other choices, and give passengers a choice in the air, right? And at least to have something healthy that they can eat. And and that's kind of the crux of how I got into this and why I still do it. And we've been doing it We've been doing it over 20 years, and we've been doing it consistently for the last 10, meaning every year we've been doing it. And then we just added the airline water study.
So I was recently on a plane, and now it's Premier Economy gets food, and then the back of the plane you have to buy your food. So do you analyze both of them? And like the back of the plane, we had to purchase like a box of stuff, and it's like a mishmash of like crackers and hummus and chocolate. It's like you can't even pick which one's best because they're all bad. A combo.
Yeah, so the snack box has become sort of the replacement product for airlines. They were doing these huge individual snacks, thinking that a life-size box of M&Ms was great for people, and they realized that they were getting ostracized for that, and also they stopped serving those high-calorie individual snacks, and they moved towards these snack boxes, right? And some of them have an air of healthiness, so where they'll serve, let's say, hummus and crackers, but they're mixed with other things like beef jerky or salami or and there's really no rhyme or reason, even though they have some sort of cute name that's attached to them. It's not really indicative of what they're serving. Some of them are okay. We mostly recommend that if you do get those, that you eat them as a meal, not eat them as an actual snack. Most people don't like to do that, or you share them with many members of your family. Try to pawn the unhealthy stuff off on the members of your family, especially if it's an in-law. But if it's your child, obviously you don't want to do that. But maybe your husband or your wife or your spouse or partner, you don't mind as much. But I think that the idea is that they're not meant for individual use, and most of them are not that great.
Yeah, it was just such a weird combination of stuff between hummus and candy and beef jerky and almonds, and like nothing really even went with each other. It was just, you couldn't even pick out of the boxes that were to order like which one was better because they were all pretty bad.
Right. And that's sort of what we look at on the survey, on the study. We look to see which boxes are okay and which aren't, and we try to analyze them from a nutrient perspective. So we'll look at what nutrients are available and why it has value, and we tell you what to leave out or to give away for actually each box, which certainly takes a lot of time. But I think we always suggest that a mini meal is best, right? So if they're offering a sandwich or a salad, those are better options for people. But the problem is that most airlines don't offer anything under 3 hours, right? That's even of worth, which is mostly those boxes are available under 3 hours. So that's really what you're stuck with on the shorter haul flights. So I really always recommend that people bring things and to have. But it's not always the case. So, I think the airlines are also missing something that's really important and critical is, if you were to offer healthy foods, there's so much research that shows and indicates that passengers will be happier, right? Food impacts mood. So if you do get to offer healthier foods that have higher protein and lower added sugar counts and, less fat and healthier fat, you'll see a transition in how flight attendants are treated, customer experience, how much more relaxed passengers would be, and how much more prepared they'll be for their final destination, of whether it's a business trip or it's a vacation. So we believe that airlines are leaving a lot of possibilities for improvement of their own airline by not thinking about food in such a positive way.
So, do you ever send people on the plane to sneak food out and then analyze it and compare it to what the airlines are giving you?
No, we haven't done. We did that once in the past, very early, and we haven't done it. We haven't done it recently. I once did that for a restaurant.
I remember you did that for Per Se, right?
Yeah, I did that for Per Se, and we it was such a nerve-wracking experience because they don't have to-go bags there. So they prohibit you basically from taking the food out. So we had to bag every item. And it was so awkward and so uncomfortable. And then at the end of that, we were doing it for New York Magazine. And in the end, the manager came over to us, and I guess the manager goes over to everybody, after they, and says hello and introduces it. It's a small restaurant. Well, I was panicked. I thought I was going to prison. I thought they were going to arrest me. But he was just came over to say, how was the meal? And thank you so much for coming.
So back to the airline, is there any airline that ever tries to woo you and like contact you and be ahead of this? Or are you always like calling them and hounding them for the information?
So most years, I'm calling and hounding for the information. I think this was the first year, I know it was the first year, that the airlines were all incredibly cooperative except for Southwest. Which was unusual because Southwest was always the best. They were always the nicest. They always had the worst food, but they were always the nicest. This year, there must have been a change in management, and I was really surprised. But I was shocked that Spirit and Frontier, who generally just ghost me, were actually, incredibly cooperative and gave me all the nutrient information. And I think that they finally, after 20 years, have realized that it's worth just giving me the information and not fighting on it, because I'm very aggressive about getting the information. I feel like it's a public service that they should provide, and transparency is critical. People have a right to know what they're eating, and they have a right to know in advance, especially if they don't have a choice. So I'm pretty aggressive with that. And we were able to put the airline food study together with less aggravation than we typically have to do. Because most airlines provided information other than, Hawaiian Air did not. It did not, which is, they give me something, but it's pretty much worthless.
So the results, what is the best? What's the worst? Who should we fly?
Well, Alaska Air and Air Canada really do care about their food. It's obvious. They have healthier items for people to eat. They're environmentally conscious, at least Air Canada is. They're trying to reduce the giving. I forgot what they're giving out, but if you bring your water bottle, and fill it up, don't fill it up on the plane ever, okay? But if you bring your water bottle and fill it in the airport on the ground, they're sort of supporting that, which is fantastic. Right, that effort alone can save thousands of water bottles, and the reduction of plastic, and we're trying to encourage environmental purpose as well. So Alaska really took top spot there, and along with Air Canada. So they have healthy foods that they're offering, mostly meals. And Air Canada really even came through because they serve real meals under 3 hours, which is fantastic. And they have things like salad shakers, and they're really trying to make a difference in what they're serving in the air. And again, it's not easy because our tastes change up there. There's all kinds of research about sound and altitude. And the dryness and humidity of the air, all impacting how we taste. So we need spicier, saltier foods in order to taste the same as it would be on the ground. So these airlines have a lot in a tall order to create foods that taste better and also are healthy.
I didn't know that. So you taste differently at altitude.
Well, it's not just the altitude, it's impact of noise around you from the jet engines. It's the impact of the humidity of the air of the airplane, and humidity is very low, and it's also the fact that your altitude.
So when you travel, like, what are your tricks? What do you do?
Well, I always have sort of a mix of nuts. Always, I'm fortunate that when I travel in airports, I always buy 2 or 3 salads, just to have in case. And usually my whole family's with us, so we'll share on those. And we also we have other things. We have apples, oranges, and bananas. Um, we even have sometimes we carry a banana saver, but everybody makes fun of me in my family. It's like a container for the banana that someone once sent me, and they still sell them at bananasaver.com. I think that's the only place.
What's it shaped as a banana?
It's shaped as a banana, and you put the banana in, it's like a case. But they're fine. Usually we just throw them in. But I like that. And if you get really good apples, some of the varieties are so delicious. I mean, the Honey Crisps and so forth, and we'll bring them along. And also, if we're traveling for 3 or 4 days or 5 days, typically we always have fruit in the house, so we'll grab all the fruit that we have, so it doesn't go bad, and we'll put that in our case or bag or backpack, so that we have all that. And sometimes, if we're feeling ambitious, we'll grill up some vegetables or some grilled chicken, and we'll put that in a container, and we'll have that. So we have enough in case there's no food available, or it's a long flight, or and we're always hungry. We have a family of very hungry people. Every time they're always eating.
I mean, the airports are also really good now. Like I just flew recently, and you can get a banana, an apple in the airport, and a yogurt and stuff there, so you don't have to eat that stuff on the plane. I mean, especially now that you're gonna have to purchase it on the plane anyway, you might as well purchase what you want in the airport.
So I was flying on Delta this past weekend, and I was really shocked. I was in premium economy, and it wasn't much more. I guess they call it Comfort Plus, and they separated, but they were going around with a basket, kind of like what they do in JetBlue, and in the basket were bananas and oranges, bananas and apples, and I was like, wow, I've never seen that before, really. And I was really surprised and excited to see that. And, I deal with the top people at Delta, and they're always trying to, show me what they're doing well and everything else. And no one mentioned this. And I was really blown away, because I looked, and obviously this is not a real study, but it was an observational study by me, and everybody was taking the bananas and the apples. So I was like, wow, this is fantastic. This is exciting. Oh my gosh, this is like real life, in motion, doing a real experiment. And oftentimes I criticize specifically JetBlue, because they do walk around with the basket for the entire plane. And I think, okay, I will fund a study where they have 2 flights and they offer fruits, different kinds of fruits, and maybe 2 or 3 snacks. And I bet that they'll do well with the fruits, especially with their clientele.
It's funny. I was going to ask you, did people take it? So people took the fruit.
Took the fruit. It was popular. Now, again, it could be just that they're New Yorkers. I mean, it's very anecdotal, but I was very surprised and excited, and it sort of went with what I expected would happen, but I was surprised that it was actually going on. And, I elbowed my wife, who was watching a movie. I was like, oh my God, look. And she's like, went back to watching the movie. No, she really was interested. And I think that, again, I always challenge, and if you look at this year's study, I even say in JetBlue's comments, serve some fruit, okay? I'm sure people will take it. And I know you think you're all cool with your snack basket, but it's 20, I think you're 20 years old, JetBlue. They haven't had one innovation. And, that leads me to my next comment, which is that airlines are so behind in everything, at least the US ones. They're just so behind. They move at glacial speeds. It's like there's such little innovation, on board. I mean, the flights, the aircrafts are old. The galleys are, the galley and the galley water, where the water comes from, is disgusting. Don't drink the coffee or the tea, is my suggestion. Bring your own water bottle and fill it up in the airport. Don't ever fill it up on the plane. Don't wash your hands.
Let's get to that. So new this year, you decided to test water. What made you do that?
Well, I was asked about coffee on the airline, and someone said, oh, is the coffee good? I heard it wasn't so good. So I started researching it like I do, and I'm an obsessive compulsive. And I couldn't stop, so I used the Freedom of Information Act and went to the EPA and got every violation that's been issued domestically since the aircraft water safety rule was in effect. Aircraft drinking water rule has been put in effect, which is in 2012. So I looked at every single violation that was issued to every single domestic airline, and then coded them and analyzed the data. So, and we found a lot of interesting things. We really found that there was E. coli found in some of the airline water, especially in the galleys, also in the lavatories when tested, and that the rule itself is a very watered down version of what we have to test water the EPA has set up domestically. Like in the United States, there's water on the ground needs to be tested, right? But they test for multiple microorganisms, not just coliform and E. coli. And I don't want to get too food safety technical here, but the bottom line is that the test that is being done in the air is not nearly the same test that's being done on the ground for our domestic water, right? Which scares me, because why wouldn't you do the same exact test in the air? It makes no sense. Their argument is that, well, they're getting it from municipalities, so therefore the test that, the water that they're getting has already been tested. My argument is that it's being transferred and manipulated and put into a new set of circumstances, and it opens itself up to increased microorganisms, and we should be testing for everything. And, my greatest fear is that after looking at how water is on an airplane, and with such a high priority of quote unquote going green, that we're going to end up with an airline stating that they're going to eliminate their plastic on board, which everybody would be like, wow, that's fantastic. So you got to follow me here. So number one, airlines will trying to catch up with the trends that they can catch up with, right? San Francisco airport has eliminated the sale of plastic bottles at the airport. Right? They want you to bring your own water bottle and fill it up at the airport. People might forget. People, may bring it and forget to fill it up, in the airport. So they don't have a water bottle on the flight, and they may be being green may be very important to them. So they might fill it up in the galley, okay, or in the lab. Those would be mistakes.
So currently, what is it on the airline that they use the water?
They use the water for coffee and tea in the galley.
And what about the ice?
So the ice is usually done on the ground, right, from the municipality. So it depends on where the municipality is. So, the EPA has those, has the municipality ratings online. So depending on where the airline is filling up, it's a lot of work for someone to do on their own. To find out where the ice is made and if the municipality has high standards. The problem also is international flights where you're landing in, let's say, Mexico or other countries that, there have been water related issues, and you don't know whether or not, the water's been filtered, or not given a lot of evidence or a lot of transparency in terms of these things. So, it creates complications in terms of what you're willing to put yourself through.
How did the airlines respond to this survey?
Not very good, especially since many of them were called to task, and it did get, it was picked up by thousands of media outlets and big ones. So from what I heard, Spirit Airlines, the head of compliance, called me. He said that every airline is talking about it, and they're, the CEO, he called it the C-suite. Everybody in the C-suite is discussing this in every airline.
I would think also the containers it goes into probably get some contamination. Wherever they transport it and keep it in the plane, who knows how that gets cleaned out or.
Well, that's the problem. It doesn't. It's supposed to be disinfected and flushed, but it's not enough, and it's not frequently enough. And the maintenance crews are busy trying to make sure the planes are working, and I'm sure that this is not a low priority, and they're probably understaffed. So the fact that the water tank wasn't cleaned doesn't seem very important as compared to the mechanics of the plane. And I think it's the same team that's probably responsible for that. So they're testing, typically testing either monthly or quarterly for the water, and it depends on how frequently you disinfect and flush the system. If you disinfect and flush more frequently, you have to test less. If you disinfect and flush less, then you have to test more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're sort of inversely related. So there are airlines that might be testing every month. The problem with the testing, okay, this is the test that's required for the airline drinking water rule, okay, which is the watered down version of the of what's called the National Primary Drinking Water Regulation. Okay, that's the rules that govern our water on the ground, right? The National Primary Drinking Water Regulations. And then there's the aircraft drinking water rule, which is what is used to govern airlines. And that rule is only testing for coliform levels, the airline one, and the high coliform levels indicate E. coli, which is basically feces, okay, poop. And what happens is they test. The airlines are required to test themselves, right? So they do this test, and then and it's all it's all on them. It's self-reported data. So the airlines do this test and then send it into a lab that they pay, and then get analysis, and then have to plug the analysis into a computer, into the airline, the ADWR's computer system, right? And that's how that's their compliance. So I don't know how the airlines are doing it, but I know that airlines, if they're not regulated, they could do whatever they want. They could get a report that there's E. coli on a plane and disinfect and flush it right away, and then do another report. I assume the airlines aren't very free with information, so it's very hard to actually find out what's going on. And the EPA, oh my gosh, they were so difficult and just didn't want to answer any questions around this. And what we found was that we still have no idea if there are any penalties that are issued when there's a violation. So an airline could have a violation on an aircraft of E. coli, and there might not be any penalty. So what's the incentive?
For the consumer or the traveler, what are your suggestions when it comes to water?
So for travelers, I recommend them bringing their own water, okay, that they fill up in the airport, because obviously you can't get through TSA with a filled water bottle, or buying a bottle of water if the airport still allows that, or making sure on board that you get your water from a container, a plastic water bottle, and that they're not filling them up in the galley. And for coffee and tea, I recommend not drinking it on the airplane. The heat doesn't necessarily kill all E. coli. And I would try to get a thermos of coffee, before you get on the flight, if that's something that's important to you. And if you're going on a 5-hour leg and you want hot coffee, right? I think you'll be much better served.
Let's get personal now. Let's get off the plane and talk about food. You and I both care about food. Can you talk about your own diet as the diet detective? Like, how do you eat?
Well, I'm moving more and more toward a vegetarian diet. I still eat chicken, organic chicken, but I'm trying to eat less and less of it. I'm eating a lot more vegetables in my diet. I have a farmer's market. I live on Union Square. So we try to buy from the farmer's market or Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, and we try to get, as much vegetables as we can. I'm still a pizza lover, but I've lowered my pizza intake. And I don't really eat a lot of cheese. So, going towards this, and it'll be a long road. But I think that, I do understand that just the foods that we eat are typically so unhealthy. When we go out to eat at restaurants, it's not clean. And we eat a lot at home. I mean, I eat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner at home. So I get an opportunity that most people don't get, which is to prepare my own foods. And I've been doing that for a long time.
You have a teenage daughter. How do you talk to her about food and how do you model those behaviors?
It's very difficult having a teenage daughter and trying to figure out what's right for her, especially when she, can have the propensity, to have some of my genetics, which are not great from that perspective. But my wife has very good genetics, and she's got a mix, and I think that she's activating my wife's genetics over my genetics, and she's sort of powered through them. She works out every day like an animal, and she tries very hard to eat healthy. And she does a good job, and she knows the differences between, healthy foods and not unhealthy foods, which is better than most people have in their vocabulary and in their mindset. I think she is very conscious of those things. I mean, I tried not to poison her mind. I tried not to give her any kind of complex. I remember once when she was in first grade, walking her to school, and her we had never had any discussion about food. I looked at her, and she was holding her breath, and I go, "What are you doing?" Much more New York than that. Like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm holding my breath." I go, "Why?" She goes, "Well, because I want to be skinny. I want to practice being skinny." And I thought, "Oh my God, I failed as a father, and as a parent, and as a health professional." I said, "You never have to do that." I said, "You're fine. Why would you want to do that?" She goes, "I just want to be skinny." She didn't even know the reason why she wanted to be skinny. She just said she wanted to be skinny. So I said, if that's something that's important to you, you don't have to focus on anything but eating healthy foods. You could eat whatever you want, but just make sure that you enjoy and learn to love healthy foods, and they'll eventually prevail in your life and diet. And that was my advice to her.
Right. It's funny because my 13-year-old went on a field trip recently and they had to stop at a rest stop, and the only choice was McDonald's, and he ate there. And then the next night they got somewhere and he had to eat a hamburger. And then so he comes home and he goes, "Mommy, I really just felt disgusting and I hate that place. I'm never eating there again." He goes, "But then I decided the next night I had a salad and some Brussels sprouts and then I felt really good." And I'm like, "All right, I did a good job." You publish a weekly newsletter. Can you tell us all about it?
Yeah, so I publish two. One is Diet Detective at dietdetective.com, and it's a free newsletter digest. So we sort of go through all of the different articles that have been published around food as medicine, exercise that we think are appropriate and people would want to read, and we put them together in a newsletter that comes out on Friday. We also do something at nycfoodpolicy.org, which is all the food policy related stories that come out that week. It has our original content and also this news digest and a research digest for those that are academically inclined or want to see what the latest research has to say. So both newsletters have different slants, and they're mostly a compilation, and it's a little different than just getting a Google alert, because we curated the information, and it has a rhyme or reason to why it's there, and it's been looked at and reviewed.
How do people subscribe to them?
So for Diet Detective, just go to dietdetective.com, and there's sign-up sheets all over the place for the newsletter. Both are nonprofits. Diet Detective is a nonprofit, and Diet Detective's mission is really to, and I'll read it to you, it's to uncover the mysteries and myths surrounding food, nutrition, fitness, and medicine, with the goal of educating, engaging, inspiring, and creating a catalyst for meaningful change in personal and community health and wellness. And food and nutrition and medicine and health can be very, very confusing. And we combine journalism, scientific research, and health literacy to synthesize complicated and complex health and medical information surrounding food and disease and try to translate it. So I think that that's what we're really trying to do. We're coming out with these detailed reports on specific diseases like Crohn's and multiple sclerosis, and kind of looking through all the research and literature and what websites and social media is saying around these topics. And we're going to basically be deciphering them for people that have these diseases. So that's Diet Detective. And for New York City Food Policy Center, you go to nycfoodpolicy.org and sign up there similarly.
Charles, thank you so much for taking the time for talk to me. And it's so good to catch up with you. We haven't talked in so long. I hope everybody is well and eat well and travel often. And now we are at the Book to Plate segment of Eat Well, Travel Often podcast. Here, I report back to you my personal experience. It could be a cookbook I cook from, a restaurant I ate at, even a place I recently visited. If you have any suggestions, please reach out to me. This is a podcast not only about food, but travel too. I'm the travel agent for my family, and recently my husband, Louis, and I were in Los Angeles for the weekend for a friend's birthday. We had one night alone, and I was able to snag a couple seats at Dialogue in Santa Monica. I never heard of this place before I began my research, but I heard of one of the best restaurants in the world, Alinea, in Chicago. You see, my love for food extends to everything from cookbooks to farmers to food documentaries, and I watched an episode of Chef's Table on Netflix about Chef Ashuz and his famed Chicago eatery, Alinea. Holy cow, I've been dying to go there. So much so that Louis and I are planning a weekend getaway just to eat there. Well, it turns out that Chef Ashuz's protege, Chef Barron, opened Dialogue in Santa Monica, and we were able to dine with him, his team, and eat his food. Chef Barron spent 10 years with the Alinea Group and learned everything from technique to menu construction to, well, creating a dialogue through food. Dialogue is an 18-seat restaurant with 8 at the counter, where Louis and I sat. It isn't easy to find. Think hidden speakeasy. It is literally a hidden door in the back of a food court on the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. It was so funny. The week before, Louis and Nathan ate in the food court and had no idea that the restaurant was only feet away. We took the elevator up with the garbage man to find a gray door with no markings and a code lock to enter. We had the code text to us earlier in the evening, and if we reveal the code here, they would track us down and kill us. The meal was a seasonal tasting menu with no choices. Barron wants to start a dialogue with his foods, and it did, between us, the chef, the sommeliers, the waiters, and the hosts. We ate a 19-course meal. Barron was not there. He was outside in the food hall creating his next seasonal menu. Because the meal is supposed to be inspired by a dialogue, my husband, Louis, is joining me so he can tell you how the meal was. So, what'd you think, Louis?
I love food the same way that you do. And you, over the time that we have been together, which is now more than 20 years, have really educated me as to how important good food is, well prepared, well presented. And this was one of the most spectacular meals I've ever eaten. And luckily, I was able to share it with you. Chef Barron's creates truly, an evening's adventure that starts from the moment you walk into the restaurant. And as each course is presented, you are taken on a ride through food, place, sensation, experience. It was really amazing.
Do you have a favorite that you had that night?
Well, I think the best part of the meal for me was the end, because after 19 courses, I was done. I mean, even though these are very small bites, each course is 3 or 4 literally chews and swallows. It's a 3.5 hour meal. So you have to be ready to strap in and sit there.
And it was hard to chew and swallow number 17, 18, and 19.
I was good at like 12. And they also paired it. We had paired it with wine and beer and hard cider. And neither of us are big drinkers, so you almost drank none of the alcohol, and I drank some of it. And but there were a couple of courses for me that really stood out. The charred lettuce with peanut and hamachi. We are good home cooks. You are an amazing home cook. I'm a pretty good home cook, and one of the things I like to do is grill romaine lettuce. Brush a little olive oil on it and char it quickly on the barbecue. But what these guys did was all completely next level stuff. The romaine was covering the ground peanut and hamachi. And as you cut into it and you got a bite of all three flavors, I mean, that was, there were moments where I was like, oh, I could eat that again. At the end of the meal, after 19 courses, I was like, I could eat that course, that one I could eat again.
Even though we're not big drinkers, what I thought was amazing was that when we were had the pairings, it changed the taste of the course. It elevated the taste of the course, that they even figured out the correct pairing for the food.
Right.
It
so
was
there
incredible.
Was wine, certain things that were white wines, and you're not a white wine drinker, and certain things, sake, which I love, and it was amazing. They were able to pair this really tart German hard cider, which I love hard cider, with I forgot what meal it was, with the rabbit and the haystack, which was also an amazing course. And you're right. They paired off each other. They had a dialogue. The alcohol had a dialogue with the food, which had a dialogue with your mouth, which clearly had a dialogue overall with the experience. And I'm just going to keep saying dialogue. What was your favorite course?
I don't know if I had a favorite. Actually, there was one, the corn hazelnut truffle, because I love corn and I love hazelnut, and the combination of that with the truffle was so incredible. It was incredibly rich, but I don't think I left anything on the plate.
You didn't leave anything, and any of them. I mean, I left some bites behind. I mean, I was full. For me, though, I think the overall experience where we got to sit at the counter and talk with the chefs as they were preparing it, talk with the sommeliers, talk with the wait staff, the hosts. That was the best part about it. We'd have eaten at Stone Barn at Blue Hill, which was probably the greatest meal I've ever had in my entire life. And the best part about that was they took us into the back and let us watch the chefs cook and prepare 3 or 4 courses. Anytime that you can sit at a high-end restaurant and watch the chefs prepare and watch the technique and then actually eat the food that you're seeing them put together, I think that takes it to a whole nother level. Actually,
the worst part about that meal at Stone Barn is when they had to drag us out of the kitchen.
Yes.
Because we did not want to leave.
We did not. So thank you so much, honey, for facilitating this, finding this place. I can't wait to take you to Chicago and going to Alinea.
You actually ate at another great restaurant a few days before, too. In Las Vegas. You came right from Las Vegas.
Yes, I ate at E by Jose Andres, which I will talk about another time. But that was another 15-course tasting menu, which was spectacular. And the next time we go to Las Vegas, I'll take you there. But
so this menu happened to be his fall menu, and he was figuring out his winter menu that starts in January. So if you plan on going, you will not get the same menu that we got. And I will post the menu on the website, but I would love to hear if you end up going for the winter menu. Please let me know how it is. Thanks, Charles Platkin, for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to find out more about Charles, you can go to my website at eatwelltraveloften.net, where you can find all the show notes. And also a special thanks to Louis for coming on and talking about our experience at the Dialogue Restaurant in Santa Monica, California. I can always be reached with any comments or recommendations you may have via email at melissa@eatwelltraveloften.net, or you can find me on social media, Instagram handle at Eat Well Travel Often Podcast, and the same at Facebook, Eat Well Travel Often Podcast. Thank you, eat well, and travel often.